Original.
Hello and welcome to Web Crawlers. This is one of our mini episodes. It's a shorter version of our main episode where we talk about all things weird, unusual news stories, read listener emails, and play voicemails. Last week, what the fuck's so funny, Maria?
Just the and play voicemail.
That's what we do. This is what we do.
I know.
We play we play voicemails here.
That's funny.
And sometimes we read emails. Last week, we had Maria's boyfriend, Craig, on the pod. And he was telling us about, like, this crazy house that he saw in Chicago one night, like, in a graveyard. And then, like, the house disappeared. And then he researched it later, and it turned out, like, the house doesn't exist. And other people have seen this crazy ghost house. Mm-hmm. And we got a lot of follow-up emails on that, which led us to thinking, like, what the fuck are ghosts and ghost houses and what's that all about? And also, like, Chicago has a crazy spooky history. So we have a friend of John Tenney on today. He is president of the Ghost Research Society. He's written several books such as Windy City Ghosts, Windy City Ghosts 2, A Field Guide to Spirit Photography, Field Guide to Ghost Hunting Techniques, Field Guide to Haunted Highways and Bridges. His LinkedIn says, my goal is to prove the existence of ghosts and thereby the existence of life after death through scientific experiments and investigations using the latest in high-tech equipment and methodologies. His specialties, he says, are spirit photography and analysis, ghost hunting techniques, and EVP sessions. Wow. It says he has investigated more than 4,100 cases since 1975.
Wow. This also says he investigates reports of hauntings and ghosts primarily in the Midwest, but also throughout the United States. He has devoted particular attention to ghost lights, also known as spook lights, and is an expert on spirit photography. Ghost lights. Well, because Craig said that house it was like this like orangish lights coming out of it.
Yeah, he said it was like burning candles.
Whoa.
Oh, well, we also have Craig joining us today to talk to Dale, so he'll probably bring that up, I'm sure.
Well, we already introduced you a little bit before we started chatting with you, but Dale, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Well, I've been involved in the Ghost Research Society and paranormal research since 1975. Wow. I started with a number of like-minded people in the theater, I guess you might call it, and who really wanted to get involved with checking out, mostly around the Chicagoland area at that time, reports of ghosts in Chicagoland area. So I started a group, co-founded a group back in 1977. Called the Ghost Trackers Club.
Oh.
And we kind of expanded from that point beyond the Chicago confines to the Midwest and then, of course, the United States. I've been to England and Wales a couple of times as well.
Wow.
But in 1982, I took over as the president of, we changed the name at that point to Ghost Research Society, which is more indicative of what we actually do, ghost research. From that point forward, we began producing a newsletter that ran from, called the Ghost Trackers newsletter, that ran from 1982 to 2001. And about that time, I began more serious writing. I wrote 6 books on the subject since that time, doing a lot of research, not only here in the Chicagoland area, but all across the country. We do an average of about 25 to 30 investigations a year. And that's usually during the summer months. So it's we're very, very active, traveling across the country. We have our first trip actually, and getting out of the coronavirus lockdown here. We're actually going to be doing something on June the 4th. We're going to be traveling down to Stones River Battlefield in Middle Tennessee, Murfreesboro, and actually meeting with a police officer that had a paranormal encounter. Episode was actually broadcast on a show called Paranormal Emergency.
Oh, wow.
So we have a chance to meet with the Rutherford County Sheriff's Police Department officer and hopefully investigate that location at night, which will be really kind of cool. We're also going to be doing the next day after that, Old South Pittsburgh Hospital, which is in South Pittsburgh, Tennessee. And then on Saturday, we're going to be doing Brushy Mountain Prison. So we have 3 things going on that weekend, and I'm really excited about that.
Dale, man, geez, that's pretty impressive. I think we're going to be emailing a lot in the future.
Well, I'm going to be doing a lot of live Facebook
sure.
videos from our investigations, both during the day and at night, kind of joining down there with another group called Crawford County Illinois Ghost Hunter Society. And either between myself or them, we're going to be doing a lot of live Facebook videos down there when we're actually investigating. So informing the paranormal community via social media that we're going to be doing that and just kind of tune in.
Boy, that's awesome.
Wow.
What's your Facebook if people want to tune into that?
Basically, they can just go to my timeline. Basically, just find me on Facebook under just my name, Dale Kaczmarek, or they can just search my for Ghost Research Society, which I also have a page there. But I will be doing some via Crawford County, Illinois Ghost Hunter Society. So they can just Google that. I just search for that, I guess you would say, in Facebook, and it pops right up.
Okay, cool.
Awesome.
Perfect. Yeah, because I know that our listeners would want to see that. Now, Craig here told a story the other day to us about a house that he saw in Chicago that like disappeared or something before his eyes. We would love to get your insight on it. It's kind of like a ghost house.
Yeah, it's the it's the only paranormal experience I've had. I grew up in the Chicagoland area. I was born in Libertyville, and I grew up in Mundelein, so I'm sure you're familiar with that area.
Mm-hmm.
This is I'm sure you know this, of course. It was at White Cemetery on Cuba Road in Barrington.
Mm-hmm.
That's where like my friends and I guess it was the early 90s. We went there. You had just heard the rumors of, it was like the cool place to go when you're a teenager. And we pulled into the road next to the cemetery, and I looked out the window and I saw, it's I want to just not even believe it was real, but I absolutely saw like an old, it wasn't a farmhouse, but like an old house with all the windows in front, and every single window was glowing like a reddish orange. And the second I turned away and then turned back, it was gone. I forgot about this for years until maybe about a year ago when I was like looking up ghosts and haunted places in Illinois. That's where I read, one of these books or whatever. That's where I read about other people having seen a disappearing house behind that cemetery.
Well, White Cemetery is a very interesting location. It's actually written about in my book called Windy City Ghosts. It was the first book that I produced.
Ooh.
And it's for many that are familiar with the South Side, and Bachelor's Grove Cemetery perhaps is probably a more famous ghost story. But I've always called White Cemetery the Bachelor's Grove of the North Side, because literally there are just numerous tales that have taken place over the years. This report of this phantom house is interesting because Bachelor's Grove has a phantom house that people have seen throughout the years.
Wow.
This house in right around White Cemetery, my understanding is it's actually seen just a little bit further west on what's used to be called Rainbow Road, which is right next to the cemetery, generally speaking. And the idea behind this,
this was next to it, and it was like there's horse property around there, because one of the funny things is when we pulled in next to it, our headlights came on like 5 horses that were standing there, and it scared the hell out of us.
Oh my God.
And then like it was like 2 minutes later when I saw that house looking out the left window. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but go on.
Many people have actually seen this house actually, and my understanding of the story concerning the house is that there was an actual house back there at one time. An actual family residence or a farm of some kind, and the house actually burned to the ground. So people that have seen this house actually see the house as though it's in flames sometimes, which kind of corresponds very generally speaking to what you encountered. Or in other cases, people will just simply see the house and then kind of see like waves of heat coming off, as you would if there was an intense flame nearby. So it's kind of what you might call a residual effect of an inanimate object, which is really kind of unique.
Wow. It's crazy. I mean, clear as day, I can see it. Like if I was, it was so quick that it was hard to say flames. I mean, in my mind, obviously this is in the 90s, so I'm just remembering back, but it looked like every window in the house had an orangish red drape, and every one of them was glowing. I mean, exactly what you would think when you think of a house on fire, but the fire was not at the windows. It was like inside the house,
Exactly.
Wow.
And that's what people have actually seen. And very often when they see it, it's only a fleeting glimpse. I mean, it's only a couple seconds sometimes.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, this was I saw it, and then I turned. It was four of us in the car. I was looking. I guess it was the left side of the car. I was looking out the window, and I saw, and I just yelled. I was like, I yelled because my friend was driving. Probably just he was like creeping, and I go, wait, and then I look back out and point, and nothing's there. Then, of course, so everyone just laughs at me, and But it's just the craziest thing because I had not read anything about the hauntings there beyond just this is spooky, like the urban legends about the cemetery. I did know a story about like a phantom car pulling up in front of the cemetery and then disappearing. I have heard that. I had heard whatever. That story. Have heard that story.
Well, see, this is very, very similar to the report that, as I mentioned, at Bachelor's Grove Cemetery, because people have seen a white farmhouse down the trail with white wooden pillars, a porch swing, and even a light burning dimly in one window. But the unusual thing, as you begin to walk towards what you think is just a little farmhouse in the distance, the house appears to get smaller and smaller and shrinks away, and it's completely gone.
Wow.
Now, there's always been this urban legend that if you are unfortunate enough to be on the front porch when this house disappears, well, you disappear with it.
Oh, no.
We don't know how many people have actually disappeared. But it's, again, very similar. The house is just there for a few seconds, and then it's gone.
Wow.
It's so crazy. And just looking that up decades later and then finding out, oh, yeah, disappearing house is part of the lore. It's like, well, I mean, how can that can't even be denied? Like I didn't know about that, and then you read about it 20 years later. It's just crazy.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on in White Cemetery. It's one of the oldest cemeteries in that area. I believe it was started back in 1820. Even actually before Bachelor's Grove, which is about actually beginning in the 1830s, but the actual deed about 1864. So this is a very, very old cemetery. There have been reports of, kind of like a lot of, initially what I heard was a lot of urban legends. I heard that the gravestones move around by themselves. And it's similar again to the stories about Bachelor's Grove with the gravestones moving around by themselves. But we think what's happening in that case is that, maybe some overzealous teenagers are out there in the middle of the night and they're kind of just picking up the tombstones and carting them around and dropping them, and they seem to move by themselves. There's even a report that was actually started by a Palatine school teacher a number of years ago, decades ago actually, that talks about that this is the graveyard of where the famous Mary Worth is buried. You've probably heard these stories where you walk into a closet, you take a mirror in there, and you say in the dark closet facing the mirror, "I believe in Mary Worth" so many times, and then suddenly her face will appear in the mirror, and sometimes they even come out and scratch you. Of course, if you get 4 or 5 people in a little tiny closet, especially people that are very, very scared, they might be clawing their way to get out, and that's how you get clawed, really, basically. The report of this Mary Worth is probably just another urban legend.
When I was growing up, that legend, it's the same legend, but what you said in the mirror was Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. Yeah. That's where that came from.
There's variations in that story. It's a very famous story. I've got several books on American folklore written by a guy named Brunveld, I believe is how you pronounce it, urban legends and so forth. And you talk about cemetery ladies and hitchhiking ghosts and all different types of really strange stuff. And you find that in there, that story, that rendition kind of told over and over again.
Right.
Yeah. Question for you. What is it, do you think, what is it about like the Chicago area? Is it the age of it and the amount of people that were there, or why are there so many paranormal sightings and hauntings in the Northern Illinois area?
Well, generally speaking, any large metropolitan area really has their share of ghost stories. I mean, you go to New York City, you go to Los Angeles, you go to Mexico City, London, you name them. Basically, large metropolitan areas tend to have a lot of ghost stories. But again, you have to go back to the history of these locations, and in many cases, there are untimely deaths that occur. There can be a lot of violence that have been perpetrated by people on people throughout the years and throughout the centuries. And I think violence actually leads to ghost stories because people, again, it's been my experience through my research that violent and untimely death often leads to ghosts because they don't realize that they have passed on.
Right. Yeah.
And Chicago has had a very rich history of that going all the way back to before it was actually even Chicago during the Fort Dearborn Massacre during the War of 1812 and all the way up to present day with drive-by shootings and so forth. So, I mean, it's unfortunate that so many of these large metropolitan areas and even smaller communities and hamlets, they also have their share of violence and untimely death. And that's where I believe the vast majority of these ghost stories come from. Their origins come directly from these reports of murders, suicides, drive-by shootings, drownings, car crashes, plane crashes, train wrecks. Maybe you weren't supposed to leave the earth when you did, but suddenly you're there and then you're not there. Just like in the movie Ghost, Patrick Swayze. If you remember that story, he was walking down the street. Yeah. He was accosted by somebody who was trying to steal his wallet. There was a struggle. He chased after the guy. He came back and he saw his dead body being held by his fiance. He didn't even realize he had passed on. And then the story with Bruce Willis in Sixth Sense, Nicole Kidman and the others. I mean, these are Hollywood renditions, but Hollywood has really done a really nice job in recent years portraying how ghosts become ghosts.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do have some questions about, since your ghost hunting techniques, what, for those of our listeners who don't really know, what is an EVP session or spirit photography? What are those tools?
Well, basically, when we investigate locations, what we're trying to do is to document one way or the other if there's something there. The first thing we will obviously do is we'll research an area before we leave, try to get relevant information, try to, the internet is a very good place to find a lot of this information as well. You can talk to people once you get there that may be guys that have had experiences, or if you're into a private home or a business, I mean, the people that are actually living there. And then what we try to do is then try to document what's there through what you call electronic voice phenomenon sessions, EVP. Or spirit photography, or setting up cameras and equipment. What we're trying to do is, if there's something there, find out who it is, why they're still there, and hold some sort of communication with them. And if you remember, I remember this is going back when I was first starting out. When I first started out, I mean, there was no equipment like we have today. I mean, I started out with a 35 millimeter camera, a cassette tape recorder, and my EMF meter was a compass. So that tells you basically what it was back then. I mean, it's really refreshing to use the equipment that we have nowadays. But, the whole idea that, when you started EVP sessions back then, and even some people do this today, you might ask a question, you leave some blank space. That's for the response. And you ask another question, and so forth and so on. But to me, that's like a one-sided communication. So what we like to have is a conversation. So there's a lot of what we call real-time devices that we do use, like the Ghost Box, like the mini boxes, like the Phasma Box, which is an application, which is an absolutely amazing application that we've used in the past. And, other devices like the Obelisk and mini portals and geoports and all these different devices that when you ask a question, then you get a response in real time that you can then build upon and hold a conversation. So you don't have to then go back to wherever you came from, maybe a week later, and review your EVP sessions and say, oh, wait, I got a great response there, but now I'm 600 miles away.
Right. Or with photography and all that. Can I steer it a different direction really quick?
Sure.
Just because I have a Chicago ghost
absolutely.
expert on, so I want to hit you with all that. All right, so another thing, about, obvious, I don't have to ask if you know this because you do. Another thing, when I was 15, 16, I get my license. It's just all about going to the cool places around Chicago.
Sure.
That's all me and my friends did. So there was a place called that we referred to as the Gate in unincorporated Libertyville, just north, like between Libertyville and Gurnee. You're familiar with that. I guess now apparently I've looked it up online. People refer to it as Devil's Gate. But when in the late 80s, 90s, it was just the Gate. Are you familiar with that?
Oh, absolutely. It's another interesting, it most likely is an urban legend. I mean, there is some truth to some of the story. Initially, it was thought to have been some sort of boys' school out there at one time. Some even say an orphanage, depending, again, which story you listen to. And the idea that somewhere along the line, some psycho or some crazy guy, got in there and began killing children, beheading them, and then placing their heads on the post of the gate, kind of like shish kebabbing them, so to speak. And they would just kind of line the gates. Well, obviously, any type of a story that was that gruesome would have been in some newspaper somewhere.
Right.
And I have searched and searched and searched, and I cannot find any story relating to that. Now, for the longest time, that place was simply off limits. For many, many decades, it was closed up. They didn't really have no trespassing signs, but it was just, you just didn't really trespass. It was kind of weed overgrown. You could actually see some of the foundations of the structures. There was actually a foundation of a swimming pool that was actually filled in.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We went back there. A couple of times.
Now it's actually open. You can actually go back there. I believe it's actually part of I don't remember right offhand what they call it, but it's a forest preserve name or something like that. They call that.
Yeah, it was actually,
and you can actually go back there. So we're going to be doing that sometime this year. We're going to be doing a road trip out there to a lot of north side locations.
Oh, that's awesome!
And hopefully be able to do some investigations out there as well.
Yeah. We used to go, it's such a shame because back in the late 80s, early 90s, the Gate was straight out of a horror movie. It was it was like it's a 10-foot wrought iron spiked gate that was just in the middle of overgrown trees and grass. It was, and I went back maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and like you said, it's just all cleaned up. It's Park District now, but back then we would you could slowly force the gate open and walk back there. And I think on our most bold, we got maybe 50 feet back there and then turned around, Right. But I don't know if you've done a lot of research, obviously, but probably 5 or 6 years ago, I contacted a historian at Cook Memorial Library in Libertyville, and she sent me a PDF of 15 years of investigation on the history of the Gate and the school camp, everything that was back there. So I should email you that if you don't have it.
That actually, to tell you the truth, I mean,
it's it's mind blowing.
Craig's joining the research society.
There you go. This is, believe it or not, this is the way I get a lot of information. Because when I'm doing presentations or workshops or conferences or ghost tours that I run, I mean, people come up to me all the time. Well, have you heard about this story? Have you heard about this story?
Yeah.
Or I got some information, or I got an interesting photograph. And, this is where I get a lot of my information from. But anything on the Gate that you have, I would greatly appreciate.
Absolutely. Yeah. After this is over, I'll email it to you. I'm going by memory. I believe the only murder that there was back then that they discovered was a guy murdered his wife and put her body. There's a little pond, a tributary to the Des Plaines River there, and he put her body there. I think that was the only one they found. But this goes back to where, like you said, it was a camp, and then it was owned by the Catholic Archdiocese of Chicago, and it was used as sort of a reform school. It was like, I think 4 or 5 different things. And there's pictures from like the early 1900s of the place, like the indoor pool and everything, which was quite a big deal in the early 1900s. But yeah, anyway, I'll send that to you when we're done here.
That's interesting that you mentioned something about the Des Plaines River, because in my opinion, the Des Plaines River is probably the most haunted river or tributary we have in the state here. There have been so many reports of activity and, unfortunately, bodies being dumped. If you remember John Wayne Gacy, he actually dumped 4 bodies over the into the Des Plaines River off of one of the interstates there. That actually the last 3 or 4 victims, the Grimes sisters murders that happened back in 1957 along German Church Road, their bodies were found very close to a tributary of the Des Plaines River called Devil's Creek.
Oh,
so there's so many running water connections in Chicago, and I really believe that ghosts are attracted to running water because of the energy given off by the running water. They can somehow, in my opinion, harness that flow of natural energy to manifest.
That makes sense.
Man, I can't even tell you how excited I am. This is great. This is great. Like, I mean, it sounds horrible, but I mean, it is horrible. But my oldest memory,
it is.
My oldest memory, like what's burned into my head, I mean, it's really terrible. But in 1978, when Gacy was arrested, you know, back then parents didn't monitor what their kids watched. I sat in front of the TV for like 4 days as they pulled the bodies out from under his house.
Oh my God.
I was 5 years old. That's my earliest memory is watching the Gacy thing go down. Yeah, like it's sick. Like it's really like it's sick. Like my whole life that was just like and then, you know, when that started to die down, right when I think he was executed in 1994, that was right around the time that Jeffrey Dahmer happened.
Jeez.
So it was like all this crazy serial killer stuff. It was anyway, but yeah, the Gacy thing is just. There
was a number of, unfortunately, serial killers that happened during the 1950s. Now, I grew up during the 1950s, and you know, it was usually pretty safe to wander around the streets even after dark, but you can't do that nowadays because you get snatched up. But I mean, not only do you have the Grimes sisters in 1957, a couple of years earlier, they have the Schuster-Peterson boy murders.
I don't know
this.
That was
a triple murder that took place that took 38 years to solve.
Wow.
Even a year before that, you had Judith Mae Anderson's body, who was actually found. Her body was found floating in Montrose Harbor in 2 55-gallon drums. Her head, her arms, and her legs in one, and her torso in the other. She apparently was shot and she was dismembered. So there was a lot of very strange, weird, some people even almost said maybe ritualistic killings that took place in Chicago about that time. And I mean, even though it wasn't the norm, I mean, there were some very strange murders that took place, and it did seem to prey on children a lot.
Yeah, it's so crazy. I mean, obviously, we mentioned last time H.H. Holmes, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
Then you go up north to Wisconsin again, and Ed Gein, who's one of the most famous.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's crazy. That whole area there, just one after another, and they weren't small killings. I mean, Gacy and H.H. Holmes. That's like over 100 victims right there. 2 people. Yeah. That's insane. And then Dahmer was another 15 or whatever he did.
Then you add Richard Speck, who killed 8 nurses here in Chicago.
Yep.
Jeez.
Yep.
That's what I mean by why, and you asked this question earlier, is why Chicago is so haunted. I mean, just look at the murders, look at the untimely deaths, look at the way people have died. Sometimes, you know, sometimes it's just accidental. You maybe left the earth when you weren't supposed to, maybe before your time. And that's why you have so many of these, what I call residual hauntings. People are seen at the site of where they died over and over again, whether it be in a home, a hospital, along a stretch of road, maybe they drowned. They just continue to show up because they just don't realize that they have passed on.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I had mentioned last podcast, I was telling them, I don't know, you know, I don't know like deep details, but the Iroquois Theater fire.
Right.
I mean, 600 people burned to death. The boat that capsized, I forget the name
Eastland?
of it. Eastland, yes, the Eastland boat. I mean, it's hundreds upon hundreds of deaths, like just tragic, unexpected deaths.
844 people is still considered the worst disaster in Chicago history. But then you just add, I actually have a tour that I do called the Tragic Events Tour, where I take people all to tragedies around Chicago. And the Iroquois Theater fire in 1903 that killed 620 people, the Eastland in 1915 that killed 844, the Great Chicago Fire that killed well over 300 people, the Fort Dearborn Massacre during the War of 1812, very close to what today is about 16th and Indiana on the in Chicago. Even the location where they brought the bodies from the disaster of the Eastland, which was the 2nd Regiment Armory, which later became the studio of Harpo Studios, where the Oprah Winfrey show was shown for a while. You have the gang wars of the 1920s and 1930s, where people were being gunned down. St. Valentine's Day Massacre, where 7 members of the Bugs Moran gang were shot down in 1929. You have the shooting of John Dillinger in Chicago, right in front of the Biograph Theater. How about Flight 191 that just went down a few days ago, actually May 25th, 1979, the worst commercial airline disaster in American history. 279 passengers were killed instantly.
Jeez.
Oh
when an engine fell off and it crashed just short of a trailer court, about 4,600 feet off the runway. So we've been out there many times, not to the actual crash site. I actually was the very first investigator. Not to ring my bell or anything. It's on a flagpole.
Ring that bell.
But in 1979, I was the very first investigator to actually set foot on the ground where the airline disaster went down.
Wow.
And at that point, all you really saw at that point was big mounds of dirt that they were trying to bulldoze up, trying to find any type of human remains. Perhaps watches, keys, anything that would give families some closure. It wasn't walled off. It wasn't fenced off. I don't trespass. That's my biggest thing. I don't go anywhere where I'm not wanted.
Yeah.
We've been out there since that time, because right now the area is kind of cordoned off. It's a part of a canine training facility, and you're able to get up to pretty close, maybe about 200 feet, 150 feet from where the airline went down. And we have gotten some really, really incredible. I mean, I'm got goosebumps just talking about it. Literally EVPs that we've got out there that when we asked for what the flight number was, it actually said 191.
Wow.
When we asked what airline it was, it said American. When we said who's flying the plane, it said Captain Lutz.
Oh,
I mean,
God.
we just got some really amazing stuff that you can find on my website, by the way, at ghostresearch.org, if I haven't already mentioned that. All my RLA investigations, or at least a lot of them are public investigations, are on there. We were really hoping to get directly on the actual site because the plane went down at 3:05 p.m. I've tried to contact the canine facility several times, and they say, well, it's really kind of reserved for family members. But many years ago, I went to a site not too far from there. It's a memorial wall. I don't know if you've ever seen that, where they have bricks for every single person who died on the disaster. And I went out there with my cell phone one day, and I just kind of did a slow pan, and I did the entire like a video to put up on the website as a memorial to people. And I went on my YouTube page, and I got so many thousands and thousands of hits. And then people actually said, oh, well, thank you so much for that. My father died on there, and my aunt died on there. And they began sending me pictures of stewardess who died on there that they knew.
Oh.
So I'm thinking if I can get enough of those people together that say that it's okay for me to go up there, and maybe they'd like to tag along with us, because who knows what kind of responses we've gotten. Let me tell you one quick story, if I could.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people know this story. It's actually in my book on Windy City Ghost. There were a number of Playboy associates and I guess you'd call it the Playboy employees who were on there. Sheldon Wax and his wife, Judith Wax. And Judith Wax was an author. She had just wrote a book called Starting in the Middle, about middle-aged life. I got a copy of that book, and it's really, really scary. When you go to page 191, which is the same as the
Get
flight
out of
number,
here.
No.
and she discusses her intense fear of flying on airplanes.
What?
Wow. That is crazy.
It is crazy. And I don't make this up. I mean, if you want, I can, after the show, send you a copy of the page so you can read it for yourself.
Dude, I'm buying the book after the show. What are you kidding?
It says something to the effect that when my travel, when my business required me to travel, I would, when I would get on airplanes, I would tremble from head to toe until the flight was over. So she's saying about her intense fear of flying in airplanes on page 191, which is the same as the flight number. Now, if that isn't just crazy,
That is
Holy
that's like, when you hear about stuff like that, I'm sorry, but people are like, oh, well, things just happen. There's coincidences that they're too big. You can't just turn your head and go, oh, well, that's not a big deal. That's a pretty big deal.
That's crazy.
That's scary.
Just some of the craziness that's in my book on Windy City Ghosts 1 and 2.
You have 2 books?
I have 6 books, actually. I have Windy City Ghosts 1 and 2. I have a field guide to spirit photography, a field guide to ghost hunting techniques, a field guide to haunted highways and bridges, which is my latest book. And I also have one called Illuminating the Darkness, the Mystery of Spook Lights.
Well, okay, yes. So what is that? What are ghost lights? Because we've talked about that a little bit. What is that?
Orbs.
Ghost lights, again, if you go to what folklore tells you, folklore will tell you that spook lights are often caused by when somebody loses their head in some sort of bizarre accident, usually a decapitation of some kind, and that what you're seeing out there is the spirit coming back with a lantern looking for their head.
Oh my God.
What?
Yeah, Craig, is that what you thought it was? Orbs.
Lost your head and you're going back with a lantern looking for your head. Aren't you going to have a hard time finding it?
That's the Hatbox Ghost in the Haunted Mansion.
So that's the folklore behind it. But we believe, me and other researchers believe that's when you see a ghost light at a location where, again, an untimely death may have occurred. And I can give you many examples of this. The Mako light in North Carolina. I was out there and I investigated that light. Unfortunately, the train tracks no longer there, but I was actually to find some actual railroad spikes from the actual train tracks that used to go through there. On the train at one time was the President of the United States, Grover Cleveland.
Uh-huh.
Memory serves me correctly. And he was at the back end, and he looked out, and he says, one of his aides, he goes, "What is that light on the train tracks? Is that another train?" He goes, "Oh no, that's Joe Baldwin. That's Joe Baldwin's light. He was the conductor and he lost his head." So I mean, even a president of the United States apparently had seen this light.
Wow.
And people all across the world have seen these spook lights. Now we believe spook lights again are a manifestation of a spirit that doesn't appear as we do in a physical form, like in a recognizable human form, but it appears simply as a ball of light. And they've been seen all across the country. You may have heard some of them, the Marfa lights in Texas.
I was about to ask about the Marfa lights.
I've never been there yet. It's a very famous stretch in Marfa out there in the desert. I've been out to see the Joplin spook light, which is called the Tri-State spook light, the Brown Mountain lights. There's actually the Mako light. There's one down in Gurdon, Arkansas. Chapel Hill, North Carolina, Waters Meet, Michigan. There's actually a couple here in Illinois, one down in Watseka, down south, and also one here in Chicagoland area called the Maple Lake Ghost Light.
Wow.
I don't know how I missed this spook light. I only had heard about orbs.
Yeah, orbs are a little bit different. Orbs, generally speaking, when people photograph orbs, and I'm not a big fan of orbs because when people photograph orbs, there's so many possible natural explanations for what orbs could be.
Sure.
Including from dust particles to insects to water droplets to digital flaws. But if somebody actually sees an orb with their naked eye and it's moving around, and in some cases actually is illuminating. It actually has a light that actually, in some cases, will actually illuminate an area. That's something different. Okay. And I've actually had people that told me they've experienced that and videotaped it. We actually have a couple of lights that we photographed and videotaped that actually have done that same thing. They actually twinkle. And how can a dust particle twinkle?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're right. Yeah.
I have one more question before we wrap it up. John Tenney had once said, who I think we know in common, that if you put like a cassette recorder or maybe your phone's like voice recorder under your pillow at night, that perhaps if you want to do like your own EVP recording, you could potentially like pick up something in your room or something like that at night. If you want to do your own EVP recording, is that something you could do, or like how would that work if you wanted to do ghost hunting on like a very individual level?
Well, first of all, I probably wouldn't put it underneath a pillow because you'd probably catch yourself snoring or moving around, or the pillow, just the pillow, the pillowcase and everything would make a lot of noise. But I mean, there are different ways. I mean, in the past I've actually used, and I still have cassette tape recorders that are voice activated.
Oh,
wow.
In other words, you can turn them on, you push the record button, and they don't begin to record unless they pick up a sound or a noise,
right.
which would be something would be an audible sound. Now, most EVPs, unfortunately, are something that we don't hear at the time it's being recorded. The digital recorders we use today are sensitive to a wide range of frequencies above and beyond of what we hear. The normal hearing is between 20 hertz and 20,000 hertz. So if it's below that, it would be what we call infrasound. If it's above that, it's called ultrasound. So if you're the best way I would assume would be put a tape recorder in a room or in a location that you think is haunted, or if you just want to try experiment yourself somewhere and let it run. A lot of these recorders will run for 400 or 500 hours because there's huge amount of space on these digital recorders. And then when you go back, just listen to it with headphones, which is I always tell people you can try to get noise canceling headphones so you kind of block off the noise in the environment around you, and you're only hearing stuff coming through the recorder, and see what you pick up. And you'd really be surprised. And you can use different programs like Audacity to pull out and take those little clips out of there and review them, or you can use something like Adobe Audition, which is a little bit more expensive, or even WavePad. There are many, many good examples on my website of both EVPs, just regular, what I call true EVPs, that we didn't use any devices that we didn't hear, or actually in some cases, what we call disembodied voices that we actually hear at the time that we're recording. And that's even, I kind of call it like the Holy Grail.
Right.
When you see something visual, that's the Holy Grail. But when you hear something and you can't explain what it is, and you also record that, that's pretty interesting as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dale. We really appreciate it. If people want to go to your website, where can they find you?
Well, they can find me at www.ghostresearch.org, ghostresearch.org.
Awesome.
They can also find me on Facebook. If they just Google, try to search me, I guess. I keep saying Google. Search me on Facebook, either my name or my Ghost Research Society, and you can find me quite easy on there. I'm also on Twitter, too, by the way. I don't that often get on Twitter. It's usually social media when I get on. It's Facebook.
Okay, awesome.
Great. And Dale, for our followers, how do you spell your last name just so they find you correctly?
Sure. It's K-A, C as in Charlie, Z as in zebra, M-A-R-E-K.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Craig, did you have something to say?
Dale, in the next hour, I'm going to visit your website, buy your books, and send you that thing on the
I
gate.
appreciate that. I'll be looking forward to seeing that.
New member of the Research Society.
Yep. It's great talking to you, man.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Dale. Have a good day.
You
Bye.
too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Boy, how
That was
awesome is
cool.
that?
Wow, what a cool guy.
What a cool dude.
Seriously, 1975 he's been doing this.
Dale for the win.
Dale for the win.
Oh, gee, yeah, he's got to be a reoccurring guy on your show.
Yeah.
I mean, screw me
The
coming
Daily
on here. You
Dale.
should have him on all the time.
The Daily Dale.
The Daily Dale. No, the Daily
The
Ghost.
Daily Ghost.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
That's not nice. All right. Good. Thanks for having me on. That was great. I'm going to go send him that stuff. I'm excited that he knows about the gate because it is an obscure thing. And it was like the place we'd go, we'd bring a case of beer and we'd walk back there and there'd be these weird foundations. It's such a bummer because you have that in your mind. And then I go back a couple of years ago and it's just like, it's right out of like Rancho Cucamonga now. It
Right.
just sucks. It's all cleaned up with like modern brickwork.
bummer.
and
One
like,
day when the
"Oh,
world
man."
is different, we should do a Chicago ghost tour.
Yes.
Well, knowing that he gives those tours, next time I visit, I'm going on those tours. Like that's
We're sitting near the back though, because then you'll
whatever. I like to think that I add something to the. Oh, I don't, huh?
you do. You just ask him before you get on the bus.
Well, I'm excited. I'm really excited because I was so obsessed with that gate place. Like I said, there's sorry to keep this going, but Cook Memorial Library is like in this town, Libertyville. That's where I was born. And just that name is crazy, Libertyville. It's right out of like mid-America. There's the Cook Mansion. Cook was the guy who like established that northern Illinois area in the early 1800s. And the mansion is still there, used as it's like a museum and a library. And I was like, well, maybe I'll check into the Cook Historical Society. And I mentioned the gate, and she goes, oh, I got to send you this. And she sent me, like I was telling Dale, like a 30 or 40 page PDF of all the research and history on the gate.
That's so
and
wild.
the fact that I get to introduce Dale to this, that's pretty cool.
This is the greatest moment of your life.
I mean, it's great. Like he doesn't know about it. I'm like, hey, Dale, here, check this out. Maybe I want to look into this, buddy. I mean, that's pretty good.
cool.
Dale. Craig, are you going to get a tattoo that says Dale? It's just a heart that says Dale in it.
I mean, I'm not kidding. The entire time I've been sitting here smiling. This is great. This is great. Anyway, all right, ladies, thanks for having me on.
Again, Craig.
All right, I'm giving back to Maria.
Well, what a success.
Give it up for Dale.
Give it up for Dale.
Yeah, so if you guys know anything about Chicago ghosts, or if there's any crazy ghost stuff that happens in your city or state, please email us and let us know, and we'll try to get an expert on from your town. Melissa, if this will just turn into a 50 states podcast, Ghost State. Is that a TV show? Ghost States?
Ghost State. Sounds familiar.
It does sound familiar, actually. If you want to reach us, Melissa, where can they reach us?
You can email us at webcrawlerspod@gmail.com, or you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at webcrawlerspod, or Facebook or Reddit.
And also, don't forget to protest safely and to donate to a good cause if you can. Some places are the George Floyd Memorial Fund, Minnesota Freedom Fund, Black Visions Collective, Campaign Zero, Unicorn Riot, and Reclaim the Block, among others. Mm-hmm. And Black Lives Matter. And stay safe out there.
Stay safe out there.
I'm Alex Siegel.
I'm Melissa Stettin.
And I'm producer Maria.
Bye.
Bye.
An Erios original.
Powered by Acast.